This is Ivy Unleashed, a Gold Ivy production. Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. You are going to be so happy you are here today because we have a literal powerhouse of a woman, Terri Cole, here that has written this book, Boundary Boss, that has completely changed my life and Brooke's life in such a great way, and it's going to change yours too. And so we are going to talk everything boundaries today with the one and only Terri Cole. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, ladies. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we were just talking about how we are seeing you everywhere. You're on Insight Timer, did a meditation with you this morning. Thank you for that. YouTube, you have a podcast, you have this book. And so, first of all, how is your life going right now with just kind of being all over and having this incredible resource for everybody?
It's very satisfying. It's exciting, but it's deeply nourishing to know that this little book baby is doing what I hoped and prayed and waited 20 years to publish it, that it would do, which is create less suffering and more joy for people all over the world. And it's what's happening. So it's very calm. I can't explain it. It's like, even though there's a lot going on, I feel incredibly grounded and centered in what's happening because it's what I envisioned happening, and of course worked my ass off to make happen. But I thought it would. I was like, it can't just be me. It can't just be my therapy clients having these experiences. And what you guys are saying, and zillions of people all over the world, is that, wow, I didn't have words for this. I didn't even know this was a boundary. So I'm so happy to shed light on this thing that was causing so much pain for all of us,
Mm-hmm.
Totally. And you are such a light, but also badass and a powerhouse, like Andrea said. Reading your book and hearing just your client stories throughout it too is, yes, like it made it relatable. And like you said, things that I didn't even know were boundaries, right? Andrea and I wanted to talk about boundaries since launching Ivy Unleashed last year and just couldn't really find the right person. And the universe was like, just wait. We got her for you. Things like self-sabotaging and codependency that we're going to get into with today's show. But it's just super timely for Andrea and I. So we just want to thank you for your time. We know it's valuable, and we are going to use this hour to get the most out of you. So let's jump right in. Let's start with just defining boundaries and maybe why you're doing this work. What about boundaries is important?
Well, let's start with, I want you to think about boundaries as your own personal rules of engagement. It's basically a way that we let other people know what's okay with us and what is not okay with us. So your boundaries are comprised of your preferences, your limits, and your deal breakers, like the non-negotiables in your life. And it's not enough to just know those things, which many people don't even know, their preferences, their limits, and their deal breakers. But you must know them and have the ability to readily and clearly, transparently communicate them. So that's what they are, according to Terri Cole. Why they're important. Think about this, and you guys know because you've read the book. Your preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers, they're not just that, they don't just make up your boundaries. Those qualities, they are who you are. So what happens is if we are not asserting ourselves, telling the truth about how we feel or what we don't like or what really doesn't work for us, we are not letting the people in our lives know who we are actually, right? We're like playing a role because we want to keep the peace and we don't like conflict or we don't want to fight with someone. But this is like institutionalized. We are trained. Most of us are raised and praised for being self-abandoning codependents in life from childhood on. Was anyone not taught to be a good girl? Was anyone not taught to not be a troublemaker? Don't be a big mouth. Don't stir the pot. Be nice above all. I don't know, the way that I was raised, it was all about being nice was like this virtue above all others. And it really was about being perceived as nice. I don't want them to think I'm not nice. So I didn't say anything. So I said yes to do the thing, even though I don't want to do the thing. And when we really get down to it, and of course, I walk you guys through it in the book, saying yes when you want to say no. Like, is that legitimately being nice? Oh, it's not. It's just lying, right? It's not being nice. Because what happens is if we continually do that, how do we end up feeling? Pissed, taken advantage of, like people are entitled. So instead of looking at our 50% of why we're doing all this crap we don't want to do and over functioning and over giving and overdoing, we then suddenly start projecting it out and being like, oh, Betty is entitled. I can't believe the nerve she has asking me. And here's the thing. Real life checkup tells us that people can and will ask us to do the most ridiculous shit. Like they will listen, giver's going to give, taker's going to take. So when you're like, when is it enough? You know when it's enough? When you say it's enough. Mm-hmm. That's when it's enough. So we need to stop putting it on others and really get, what I teach you to do in this book is get really centered in your own self, knowing, raising your awareness about who you are, what you want, how you feel, and then teaching you how to have those boundary conversations, how to construct a boundary conversation, a boundary request, even with really difficult people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this book is written so well because it's like you help us see our issues in a way that's compassionate and like, you're not alone in this. Like we are all guilty of doing this and we're all different. And you have a quiz too that you can take to see like kind of what are my tendencies? Because like you said,
yes, people can get that at boundaryquiz.com. Super easy.
Boundaryquiz.com.
13 questions.
Yeah, it's so great. And Brooke and I just took it and we are different. I am a powerhouse and she is a
pushover. And I was like, is this why we work? How is this going to happen? What's going to happen in the long term? You're just going to walk all over me?
Listen, two powerhouses, that would be tough. Mm-hmm. 2 pushovers, that would be tough. So yeah, part of it is, it is, but as you get healthier together, it'll work even better, mm-hmm. right? So you don't end up feeling resentful.
Mm-hmm. And it, do you feel like the quiz, because how I viewed it was, this is where you're at right now, but doing the steps in the book is going to get you in a healthy spot. So it's kind of knowing what your starting point is. Like, I'm not going to be a pushover for life if I do something about it, right?
That's absolutely. And here's the thing, the reason I created that quiz, and I tell you, that literally took me 6 months to create. That sounds crazy, but to make it psychologically accurate and astute, it took forever. But anyway, so it's actually a really good quiz. It's not like one you're going to find in Cosmo. It actually is based on like facts and data. What it does is you're busy, we're all busy, but it gives you a place to focus your time and attention. It makes you go, oh, this is where I fall down on myself for my boundaries. This is where I need to strengthen them. And if you're a powerhouse, it might be, oh, this is where I'm rigid. This is where I get like my way or the highway when I'm out of balance. And the way that I phrase it in the quiz and in the book as well, it's about when you're out of balance. Because think about it, when life is super easy and everything's going amazing, it's really not that hard to have decent boundaries because there's nothing to push up against. Mm-hmm. It's when we don't feel good, when life is hard, when we're trying to avoid conflict, when we don't want to have a hard conversation, when someone is trampling on the boundaries we have not yet expressed, right? Because a lot of times clients will say to me, this person in my office, they're a boundary bully. And I'm like, are they though? Like, tell me why. Oh, well, they just expect and they just assume and they're just entitled. And I'm like, okay. And when you said something to them about that, they're like, oh no, I haven't said anything. I'm like, right. So you're going to need to say something and give them the opportunity to perhaps respect your boundary that you can put in place with kindness, with ease, with grace. I think a really valuable thing we could talk about is the myths around being a boundary boss, because people have the wrong idea. They think if someone has really good boundaries, that they're a bully, that they're like my way or the highway, that they're like strong and aggressive. And no, that's just as dysfunctional as someone whose boundaries are too porous, right? Because we're talking about porous boundaries, which is more of the pushover or the peacekeeper. And then we have more rigid boundaries, which is more, can be the powerhouse, can be the loner, can be the ice queen. So there's different archetypes. But what we want is what's in the middle of those two things. So being too hard, that's just the other end, right? That's the pendulum swinging from being super loose to structured. And like if you're a powerhouse, you could be an amazing leader, like in life. But then when you're out of balance, you can be too bossy, you can be too controlling, you can like get up in other people's stuff, you can be codependent, right? You can really want to be controlling outcomes for others. And these are all the things that you learn about your own boundary style, because we are all so different that it's really important information. So boundaryquiz.com, go to it, people.
Yeah. And find out what you are and then read the book, or vice versa. But please do both, because it's going to change your life. Mm-hmm. What I love about the book is it's the step-by-step process. So you have to do it chronologically. And the first step is digging into your boundary blueprint, right? And you call it your basement. And that is really the awareness piece. And as health coaches, we know that to make any change, you have to have awareness. You have to know where you're starting. So I think taking the quiz first to know where you're starting is great. But even just the tools that you offer and the reflection questions, taking the deep dive into how does this pertain to you, right? Giving the example of the client and then asking those reflective questions so that it pertains to you. But what I want to know about within that, because that did stir up some things, talk about, right, epigenetics and how our boundaries or our lack thereof are from our parents and our parents' parents, and these things that we have no control over. And you have to dig into your past, but you say you can't get stuck or blame or shame. And so let's kind of talk about how you do the deep dive in your past, but then not see, oh shit, this was so unfair, and to not get stuck there.
Well, here's the thing. We will be able to honor, right? If you're just starting to do your dive into your boundary blueprint. So first, let me just tell you what it is for those watching or listening. This is basically, I want you to think of it like a blueprint for a house that someone else designed. So the way that you relate to boundaries in your relationships, the way you relate to the greater world, how you relate to money, your job, your friends, all of those things, we had modeled behavior in the homes that we grew up in. Whether people did a good job of modeling behavior, whether they did a crappy job of modeling behavior, we learned a lot of what we think of as sort of the way the world is from other people. And so identifying, now I realize that, when I started really digging into my own boundary blueprint, I was like, oh, this is just the way it was for my mother. Mm-hmm. I don't have to be a people pleaser. Like, that's how it was for her. And so we internalize like, oh, this is what it means to be a woman or a wife or a mother or whatever, right? It's what we see. And it doesn't matter if you weren't raised by biological parents, whatever adults influenced you in your life, you have some kind of unconscious, right? So that's where the basement is, information about how you're supposed to be in the world and how you're supposed to be in your relationships. This makes up your downloaded boundary blueprint. It also has to do with the country you live in, the culture, how they regard whatever gender you're identified with, how open or closed your family system was. Like, think about it. Some family systems are very closed, meaning people don't come in and out, right? It's very just us, just this core group of people. Then you have open family systems, which was more mine, where people slept over. It was the house that everyone hung out at. It was, my mother was very loving and welcoming to my friends, even if they had crappy parents. She was a good parent, so she had a lot of love to go around. Now, those things also influence, right? Because I have an open heart and an open house to a degree, right? I'll take in, one of my nephews lived with us for a period of time. If I hadn't come from that kind of a family system, I probably never would have done that. So in the book, I walk you through these questions that you answer, because my answers are not your answers, right? You guys have different answers, all of us, like your boundary blueprint is as unique as your fingerprints. But it's important that we know what is in there, because once you realize, like, oh, I thought this was the way it was, as opposed to, oh, this is what I learned in my family of origin, but I can make a different choice. Mm-hmm. I can decide that it doesn't have to be that way for me. So it's not blaming necessarily, but here's the thing about not blaming. If you haven't done this work before, and if you had a chaotic family system, if there was abuse, if there was addiction, if there was, neglect, people falling asleep at the wheel, there is a part of you, the kid within you, has got to feel like they're being acknowledged, right? Of course, we don't want to get stuck there, but we can't bypass the reality of what we experienced as kids. Like we have to integrate it. We have to acknowledge it. We have to go, wow, that was really terrible. I was kind of on my own. My mother sort of disappeared when I turned 13. My parents were getting divorced. Like I fell into the hands of like hanging out with this much older woman, and, nothing too terrible happened, but there's still a reality. That was my experience. And I used to always, when I was younger, you always want to protect the adults in your life, right? As kids, we just want to be like, whatever, I know why. They had a hard childhood and they did better than their parents did. The little kid in you doesn't care at all. Like the little kid in you is like, I've been considering them above myself my entire effing life. Like, no, this process is about the truth. That was really hard to not have guidance at such an impressionable age. I'm grateful, right? What did it teach me? There are many good things. Our dysfunctional, right? Our dysfunctional childhoods, many times we get all of these adaptive skills that now, I knew how to make decisions and get stuff done and do all, because I had no choice but to do those things. So back to what you were saying about sort of not blaming, it's more about processing it so we don't stay in blame, but we must allow ourselves to have whatever feelings we have about any way that the parental impactors of your life let you down and failed you, because they did, because they all did. And if you're a parent, you're going to fail yours too in some way. I mean, this is just part of the human condition, Anyway, I feel like I got off track, but did I answer the question?
You spoke to our souls, because so much of what you said, but I think something that's really important for, even people that had a really solid childhood is that it's okay to have both. It's okay to explore it and be grateful for it, but also realize that it's impacted you in a certain way and do something about it. Like you don't have to feel like you're not grateful for your parents, and you can acknowledge they did better than theirs. But like you said, you still need to process that. You need to process who you are and your needs that weren't met, and then how they're affecting all your relationships now. Like this book made me feel so seen with all the different examples of your story and your client stories. And I think sometimes you need to read what other people have been through and like, oh my gosh, that's me, And like Brooke said, and you said too, there's exercises throughout the book, and there's some at the end of the book too that really help you do this in a gentle way, so you don't feel like you're blaming people. You feel like you're just seeing yourself in so many ways for the first time. Like I feel like I've done a ton of internal work. And your book, I was like, shit, I'm a high functioning codependent girl. Like I would have never said I was codependent. And so we definitely have to get into this, because like you said, like what? I'm the person everybody leans on. I'm independent. I do everything. But, right. And so let's get into high functioning codependency. What does that mean? And
what do we do about it?
What do we do about it? Help.
That's a really good question. Well, let's start with codependency, right? So codependency, according to Terri Cole, is being overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the circumstances, the decisions, the relationships of the people in our life, to the detriment of our own internal peace, maybe our financial, emotional, physical well-being. Make sense? We're overly invested. Now, I say it has to be to the detriment because here's the deal. We're all lovers. Of course we love our people. Of course we want them to be happy. So that's not codependency. That's called having a relationship. It's codependency when your sister, your best friend, somebody gets in touch with you and says, oh my God, I have this crisis. And you literally, in 2.2 seconds, their crisis is now your crisis, according to you. That your need and desire to fix it is so compulsive that you are immediately Googling, underlining things, making phone calls, like fixing. And that's really an important aspect of codependency. Now, why did I add the high functioning piece? Because my style of codependency, and then all of my clients over the past 25 years, I like exactly what you just said. I wouldn't have identified as a codependent, because think about it. We have this idea, codependent no more. You have to be involved with an addict. It's all about enabling someone's bad behavior. Now, that is codependency too. But that's not really what I'm talking about, because I'm talking about the women in particular who are so high functioning that we just make it look easy. We are the people that people come to. We are the ones who are like, she knows what to do. I'm going to her. She's the rock in the family. She's the hero child. She's the whatever. That does not mean. So when my clients, when I would say to them, hey, what I'm noticing is a codependent pattern here, they'd be like, no, lady, you got it wrong. I'm the one everybody comes to. I'm making all the money. Like I'm doing it all. So there's no way I'm codependent. And I was like, oh, my clients don't know what codependency is. So the problem is that when you are highly capable with this codependency stuff, people do not see. We make it look so easy. People do not see the toll that it takes. And because it's a compulsion, before I was aware of it, I couldn't have stopped. No way. There was no choice, right? It was immediate reaction. If there is a need, I'm going to fix it. You don't even have to be close in my life. You could be like my hairdresser. You could be like my mailman. I mean, there's a story in the book about my mailman, like literally, where I would do it for anybody because it made me so uncomfortable when someone else was in pain, when someone else had distress. I wanted to avert that feeling so much. And that's really what it is. So when I started my therapy practice, I was a talent agent for almost 10 years before I became a psychotherapist, where I was negotiating contracts for supermodels and celebrities for like endorsement type deals. And I was on my own psychological path by then. I had stopped drinking when I was, I got into therapy at 19, stopped drinking at like 21. And so that really opened my eyes. And then I really got into self-help. And I just couldn't believe that I could change my life simply by learning more about myself, by changing my mind about things, that what I thought wasn't in stone. It like blew my mind, that it had nothing to do with the hand I was dealt, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. That like, I could be like, wow, these cards suck. I don't like this hand. Goodbye. I want new cards. I want a new deck. Oh, you know what? I don't even like this game. I'm making up a whole new game. And that's exactly what I did in my life, where I was like, it really doesn't matter what happened before. I have the power right now to create something that I want. But being highly codependent takes a lot of bandwidth. So even though I was doing all the things and I was climbing this Hollywood ladder and, next job, running an agency, like I was just sprinting up the ladder because I was such a workaholic. Perfectionism, workaholism, all of these things can be twisted in with high functioning codependency as well. But then I got to a point where I was like, oh, still don't like this. Still do not feel the way that I want to feel. And what I really got amped about was how I was changing my own inner life and my own inner experience through the therapeutic process. And that's when I just decided, literally at the height of my career, where people were like, wait a minute, you're giving up this fat job with all these perks, flying private, all the things, to go to grad school to become a therapist. Are you nuts? And I was like, yeah, man, that's what I'm doing. I remember my father being like, why would you do that? And I was like, because I'm not satisfied or happy in this very unhealthy world. By then I was dealing with models. At the end of my career, I was like doing TV and film stuff for models. And it was like during the 90s where the supermodels were like they were like goddesses. You know what I mean? It was culturally so nobody got that I was leaving what they thought was this really shiny, glamorous job to basically become a clinical social worker. But when I said to my dad, I said, hey, I'm not happy. And he was like, sounds weird. That's literally what he said. I was like, okay, well, luckily I don't need any fucking money from you. So he ended up becoming supportive though after a while. I was like, Dad, my happiness matters. Like what I want to do matters. And that was how, anyway, long way around the barn to get back to when I opened my private practice, I started seeing this pattern of disordered boundaries and people having no idea that this was the source of their pain. They would be complaining about a symptom, but I could follow it back and be like, oh, they didn't establish the rules of engagement with this person. They didn't tell this person they didn't like that comment they made. They didn't tell them what their preferences are, what they like, what they don't like. And then they feel very alone in their inner relationship and feel like the person doesn't know them. And many other expressions of disordered boundaries, of course, came through my door, but it made me realize with the high functioning codependency that it was so much more than what was out there, and that it was so much more common because you have lots of schools of thought about it. People think that one of my colleagues who I love very much, Ross Rosenberg, he's like, codependency is only between narcissists and people with self-love deficit disorder, which is what, he calls it. And that's one theory. And I believe there is codependency there, but I'm talking about codependency as a way of life is what I saw and is what I lived. So it's a major part of having disordered boundaries. Because think about what codependency is: overgiving, overfunctioning, fixing, auto advice giving, auto accommodating. All of those things are boundary violations. So the basis of high functioning codependency or any codependency is disordered boundaries. And it's so important, and we so need to learn about it, that my next book is about high functioning codependency.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.